Decorated war vet, but a convicted criminal. ICE wants to deport him. Jose Barco's story is one of battlefield trauma, bureaucratic bumbling, and eventually a serious crime. Tyrone Bowman, live. According to NPR, or National Public Radio, a story written by Tom Bowman, no relation, and Quill Lawrence. So let's talk about Jose Barco. It's a photo of him in Iraq in 2007. So let me just show you the photo part. All right, let's get this story started. According to NPR, this week several dozen Venezuelan nationals were transferred from a U.S. immigration detention center in South Texas and boarded a deportation flight to their home country. Among them was 39-year-old Jose Barco, a decorated American soldier who deployed twice to Iraq, saw horrific combat, and received a Purple Heart after an explosion tossed him through the air and left him with a traumatic brain injury. He was just 4 years old when his family left Venezuela, a country his father fled to after he was being released as a political prisoner in Cuba. Jose Barco's fellow inmates in Texas, most of them much younger, simply call him Cuba. How an American veteran, a father of a 15-year-old daughter, found himself inside this sprawling detention center outside Corpus Christi, Texas, waiting for a flight to a country he barely knows, is a tortured tale of battlefield trauma, bureaucratic bumbling, and eventually a serious crime. Quote, his situation is incredibly complex and tragic, said Anna Stout, a former mayor of Grand Junction, Colorado, who was helping his family, told NPR. It's the story of multiple failures of the U.S. military when it comes to one of its own soldiers, of a man who fought and bled for the United States believing he was earning his right to be called an American, only to find himself in deportation proceedings, and of the tragic intersection of a new age of immigration policy and unfortunate parole timing. End quote. On Thursday, Barco's journey took another unexpected twist when he arrived in Honduras en route to Venezuela. The Venezuelan authorities there refused to take him. According to his family, the Venezuelan immigration officials didn't believe Barco's birth certificate was genuine. They said it looked too new. They said his accent sounded Cuban to them, plus he didn't know his Venezuelan national identity card number, called a cedula. One even told Barco it wouldn't be good for him in Venezuela because he has no family there. Barco now sits again at a U.S. detention center, this time in Port Isabel near Los Fresno, Texas, wondering what country will take him, if not the one he risked his life for in Iraq. Quote, I feel very scared for him, said his wife, Tia. America should not be sending a decorated veteran to Venezuela. End quote. Now that Venezuela also has rejected him, she said, we have no clue how to navigate this as of now. This whole ordeal has been unimaginable. Barco deployed to Iraq in the summer of 2004 with a unit from Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, Colorado. He was a private with Charlie Company from the 1st Battalion of the 506th Regiment. His unit was in western Iraq at a time of fierce fighting against insurgent forces and car bombs. While Barco was on patrol in November, with his platoon, a car laden with explosives swerved and went airborne, erupting in flames. So this is a portrait of Jose Barco when he first enlisted in 2003. The photo was supplied by his wife, Tia Barco. Ryan Krebs was the company medic As he was treating a wounded soldier amid the dust and smoke, he spotted Barco lifting the front end of the burning car, which had two soldiers pinned underneath it. They were unconscious when he pulled them out. Curbs remembered Barco was on fire after lifting the car. Barco said he remembered none of that, only being thrown against a wall. Quote, I kind of remember the impact of the explosion, Barco told the PBS series Frontline, which aired a story in 2010 about his unit called the Wounded Platoon. They told me I was just walking around in circles or whatever, just cursing out loud, but I don't remember that. Barco was treated for burns to his hands and thigh, as well as a lacerated lip. But Frontline reported there was no record that he lost consciousness for several minutes or any suspicion of a possible brain injury. So Barco soon received further treatment at Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas for burns, but no treatment for traumatic brain injury or TBI. Months later, Barco noticed ringing in his ears, and military doctors at Fort Carson realized he had a head injury stemming from the November 2004 explosion, according to Frontline. He could have received a medical discharge with benefits, but he wanted to go back to Iraq, telling them he was fit for duty. Barker was told that his burns and hearing loss qualified him for an honorable medical retirement from the Army, which would leave him with a lifelong pension and free health care with the VA. But Barco pressed his doctors to let him return to his unit, even though he was suffering from nightmares and sleeplessness. Quote, I told my doctors, hey, I want like to go back, Barco said in the documentary. They were looking at me like, no way, you're crazy. You should get elevated or evaluated psychologically. They worked with me, they lowered my profile, and they dropped everything cause, if you want to go, they're going to let you go unless you are paralyzed or something like that. They need people, end quote. Barco made it back to Iraq in the fall of 2006. During the surge of forces meant to tramp down the increasing sectarian violence. A few months before this, on July 6, one of Barco's commanding officers, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Hutchison, helped him fill out the forms to become a naturalized citizen. For non-citizens, one of the promises of joining the military is that it's a path to U.S. citizenship. Quote, I distinctly remember Jose Barco completing and submitting his application for United States citizenship. Hutchison wrote in a February 2025 memo for immigration officials. He was fully eligible, and with processing timelines at USCIS at the time, should have been approved by the end of calendar year 2006. At some point, the packet was lost, and we have not been able to find a chain of custody document. By the time he returned home in December 2007, Barco's TBI symptoms, or traumatic brain injury, worsened after he was exposed to still more explosions in Iraq, telling doctors he felt dazed and had memory problems. He was prescribed a variety of drugs from Tylenol to Buspar and a psychoactive anti-anxiety drug. Barco said the drugs didn't help. He was discharged in 2008 when he was 23. Steve Annexis, a retired Army brigadier general and psychiatrist, said Barco's injuries happened when the Army had yet to understand these types of hidden wounds. Quote, this was at a time when the Army was not acknowledging the significant effects of blast concussions. Exnatus said, adding that such a head injury can aggravate PTSD, or post-traumatic syndrome disorder. You really can't control your emotions. You become irrational, impulsive, end quote. What happened next with Barco, Annexis said, was not surprising at all. His mental health problems turned into criminal behavior. In April 2008, Barker was driving past a house party in Colorado Springs, where he had earlier that night been kicked out for firing a bullet into a basement ceiling. Barker pulled out a handgun and shot into a crowd of teenagers standing on a porch. A bullet struck 19-year-old Ginny Clemens, who was pregnant. It left her with a serious leg injury. Clemens declined to speak with NPR. Through a relative, Barker has said he has no memory of what happened. Barker was eventually charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder and 1 count of menacing. 4th Judicial District Judge Larry Schwartz sentenced him to 52 years, calling the crime stunning in its lack of compassion. It brings considerable dishonor upon the uniform you wore, according to a story in the Colorado Springs Gazette. Barker ended up spending 15 years in prison, where he was a model prisoner teaching English and math. And for good behavior, his sentence was reduced. A parole board released him on his first hearing. He walked out of prison on January 21st, 2025, one day after President Trump was inaugurated, where he vowed to crack down on crime and illegal immigration. Barker planned on heading to a family reunion in Florida. Instead, he saw agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, waiting for him. He was hustled into a van. I was shocked. I told my case manager, "This is a joke, right?" "I'm a retired veteran," Barker told the Gazette. Ryan Krebs, the former Army medic, and Barker's wife, Tia, said they hired a private lawyer and paid him $400 for a consultation, then found a pro bono lawyer in Colorado to help with his case. But when Barker was transferred to Texas, they searched in vain for another pro bono immigration lawyer. The ones they contacted were too busy. They reached out to American Civil Liberties Union, but were told the ACLU does not take individual immigration cases. Barker was ordered to be deported to Venezuela by Assistant Chief Immigration Judge Matthew Kaufman in February at Aurora, California. Barker said he was not interested in appealing, even though the judge asked, "Are you sure?" Barker later told his brother he was disillusioned and tired. "Send me to a country that will accept me, since my country doesn't." According to the Gazette. Jose's spirit just broken, said Krebs, the medic. They defeated him for sure. Krebs and the other supporters tell NPR they won't give up. They hope he can maybe go to Mexico, where he can get access to better health care and a better life. They're also hoping that Democratic Colorado Governor Jared Polis will pardon him, opening Barker up again to possible American citizenship. "He's an American, and that's how he sees himself," Krebs said. "He's a disabled combat veteran who saved people that day. In my eyes, he's an American hero." Krebs can understand how some, including Ginny Clemens and her family, could find no sympathy for Barker. What he did was awful. He knows what he did was wrong. He served his time and should be allowed another chance, Krebs said. Well, let me just interject this here. Political prisoners, I'm talking about politicians who have committed horrendous crimes, don't even get 52 years in prison. They go to Camp Cupcake, a place where they're treated like celebrities. They get paroled, or they get their entire sentence wiped out. Hutchison, the Army officer, said in his February memo to immigration authorities that Barker's peculiar legal resident status puts him at extreme risk of personal harm if he is extradited. In an interview with NPR, Hutchison said, "If you cherry pick the facts of his story, we could call him a hero or a villain. Still, he called Barker an upstanding person who did his time, adding his story is a symbol of how the prison system is supposed to work." It boggles the mind. How can you pin a Purple Heart on someone and not give them citizenship? Said Denitza James with the League of United Latin American Citizens. The organization is tracking some 400 veterans who have been deported or are in that process going back to the early 1990s. James is a two-tour combat veteran who served as a gunner on convoys in Iraq. She held a green card at the time and twice had her citizenship ceremony canceled because the Army ordered her to redeploy. When she left the military, she was still not a citizen, James says, and she was later naturalized when she married another soldier. I left the military with an expired green card, says James. James says LULAC is urging politicians in Texas and Colorado to intervene and let Barco be moved to a VA hospital for medical evaluation. Tia Barco, who is American, said ICE agents earlier this week asked her husband about his citizenship application from 2006. But he didn't ask why they were inquiring, she said. Tyrone Bowman, thank you for watching. Never surrender, never quit.